This is a visual podcast of a series where I'm talking with people whose voices I believe really need to be heard in the world. People who are cutting new paths in the way that they influence and lead situations. And this conversation is with Nick Ashton, and you will learn more about Nick as we proceed.
Day.
And good day to you as well.
Good
That's
day. Let me just get this in focus for us.
right.
Hopefully it'll realign. Although I'm sure I look better in soft focus. Let me.
Oh, there you
Come
go.
on.
It
Did
went
it?
into
Did it?
focus.
There we go. Now everybody can see my true self a little bit more. I was really worried this morning that we've had a storm come through Ireland and the UK.
Oh, I read about that.
Yeah, and until about 5 minutes ago, I was thinking we're not going to be heard because the wind was howling past the window with such a noise.
Oh my goodness me.
So
Uh,
yeah, I'm quite pleased that I'm actually able to hear you on a call.
And I was just going to say, you look younger every time I see you.
What do you want?
Well, a podcast for starters, but I kind of took that for granted.
I find it's for uh, quite a number of years ago now. I grew a beard because I had a crash on my bicycle when I was just after university. I got a really nasty scar across here, so I decided that I would grow a beard in 1996. That's how long ago it was to
Wow.
cover and
Oh my
and
God. You don't look
and
that, you don't look that old already.
oh and and so it stayed on my face. But my beard, whenever I crop it back, it seems to take years off of me. So I
Ah,
gave it like a fresh kind of
ah.
cut the other
Well,
day.
it's worked. I wish I could do the same, really. Then it would be.
My worry is that if I ever get to a point where I have to take the beard off, I'll look so young. People will wonder whether I can do the job that I've
Well, I think the evidence will speak for itself by then already.
used. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Yeah.
So, gosh, lots of things I want to ask you about. And I've just done a very brief introduction saying that, I'm doing this series. I don't know who else will be in the series yet, but of people whose voices I think need to be heard, especially people in positions of influence and leading that I have felt for a long time. There's this need for quite a paradigm shift in the way that the corporate world is managed and led. And when I thought of this, you absolutely came to mind.
Wow. Well, that's very kind of you. Yeah.
So, and I was trying to think when we first met and what prompted that first meeting. I mean, you came on I did a program for you, or you came on a program.
I did, yes. Yeah, that was in 2009.
Wow.
I know,
Gosh.
doesn't time fly?
Gosh.
Um, what prompted it was I had, for quite a number of years, so my background is a chemical engineer. So I spent the first probably 10, say, up to 15-ish kind of years of my career being very technical. And I moved into the manufacturing space in between some projects, and it was the first time I ever got feedback from a team, and it was a real eye opener and quite a daunting thing to kind of look at and try and respond to. That I went from being the project manager where I could tell everybody what to do and they just did it
Yeah.
because they were on contracts. And if I said, do this by tomorrow, it just got done, to realizing that it was much more complicated than that when you had a team that you were trying to motivate and influence and get together. And having seen a lot of that first set of feedback, I knew I needed some help and to kind of come at it in a different way. And that's when I saw your NLP for Business Practitioners course, and that was way back in 2009.
That's incredible. But it's interesting that, it's very significant that having got that feedback, you recognized you needed to act on it, because some people will get the feedback and plow on irrespective and not necessarily invest in the development in the way that you invested at the time. And that's something I certainly recognize as a pattern over time for you, that personal commitment to you developing whatever is needed to manage a new situation, a new context.
Yes. I mean, it would be very, very unfair of me to say that I didn't get some help in pointing me from other people who were more experienced in leadership, but I listened to them. The piece that's always been a big motivator for me is when I hear feedback from people that means that the way I'm interacting with them is not putting them at their best.
Yeah.
There's a human connection piece in there that's always influenced me a huge amount.
Yes.
And that, I think, was the main driver behind trying to get to a different way of communicating with people, a more effective way with meeting people in the style that they preferred rather than what I preferred. And it has kind of stuck with me over time.
Yeah.
Hence recently coming back to you and saying, hey, I'd like to connect with you again so that we can pick up some challenges that I've got today.
And even, and not even, but in this last year or however many months we reconnected, the shift, the learning in you has been remarkable. So even though you were in a very good place and had invested and made big changes for yourself, it was quite phenomenal, I thought, the way that you took on board and became aware of patterns for yourself. And the shift, that I've noticed in kind of meeting with you, online in that time is amazing.
I certainly feel that it's moved along a huge amount. Within the corporate kind of setting, and I have the good fortune here of having a good rear view mirror for many decades now of going up through the levels. The challenge is always changing. And I think
Yes.
for me, stepping into what is a very senior role in a very big company, um, my set point shifted a huge amount, and I was kind of caught in the middle of it, just realizing that what had worked before maybe was now not working for me, and I needed to revisit some basics. And you helped me through that a huge amount.
So what was different this time about this role compared with what you'd been doing just previously and all that you'd learned, to get you to that point?
Yeah, having sat with that for a while, because I could say this and people think, oh, well, he must have, instantly thought this. It took me quite a while to work this out. But for, let's call it 25 years plus of being in the corporate world, my my circle of getting fulfillment, um, being associated with other people, enjoying themselves and everything. But I always had the individual feedback of solving a problem, being creative, making something happen, being a differentiator. And suddenly I realized that my job wasn't to do that anymore. My job was to set the environment so that other people could make those interventions and be
Yeah.
creative and drive change. And so my whole feedback kind of loop was different. I had to go looking for sources of personal inspiration that were a little bit different than previously. And I realized that I now needed to channel energy into those people in my team so that they can do what I was previously doing in my kind of last job roles. So that was probably the biggest change that I could see, as well as managing people that had decades and decades of experience in business as well. And
Yep.
I realized that when things are not in a good place, there's a strong bias towards autocracy, I think, in many corporate organizations. Command and control, do it like this because then I know it will
Yep.
improve. And I found that during my kind of time, and this is when I connected back with you, I was at that pivot point. We dug ourselves out of a problematic period within the organization.
Yep.
Um, we'd done that, I think, through a lot of hard work. And it was then the time to kind of say, do you know what? This might have got us to here, but in terms of the culture that I'm responsible for kind of demonstrating in the organization, going forward was going to require something different. So it was a
And
nice kind of pivot.
I think that's such a key word that you just used there, demonstrating, because lots of people can talk the talk, and set out the principles and the values and, how the culture should be in very, very grand words. But what I recognize in you is you demonstrate it. You seek to live this. So, for example, in this, let's say the last year, what have been some very specific learnings and changes that you've made, would you say?
Okay, so within these last 12 months, I think the first biggest learning, and it was probably I'd call it the most scary part of this is owning up to the fact that you're not very good at something and you're going to try and do it differently. I
Yep.
just the power of that to go to my team at the time and said, do you know what? I've recognized that what's got us here isn't going to get us forward. And there's stuff that you would like me to do differently and to turn up slightly differently so that you can be more successful. I think when I look back now, the power of just embracing that conversation has
Yes.
opened so many dialogues with the people in my team and then their teams as well. It's been a huge cascading effect. And I don't think going into it, I saw it when I went into that, and I know that I remember the conversations that you and I were having about the importance of doing it, and I did it not truly realizing just how important that would be. Just getting the permission from the team that I could change to try and improve, and
Yes.
that their involvement in my journey was essential to me kind of
Yes.
like improving. And I would say almost within within the space of a few days, the team rallied around me rather than seeking to give me points that they would prefer me to do maybe differently. The dynamic changed completely. And it's something that was so influential for me that I'm now encouraging other people to do similar. It's a very brave step, I think, when
Yes.
you're taking something like that for the first time. And certainly I felt, a little uncomfortable doing it. But my goodness, the learning and the support that you garner from it is huge.
Well, what I know this is what you did, and what I'm hearing in the way that you describe it is that you take the ownership, you own that the change is, and some people would say, well, it is a way of kind of showing your vulnerability rather than a brave or strong face, and how significant that is. And as you say, the consequence was the team rallying around you and having spoken with your team to know that some people who had probably very strong opinions have commented on the remarkable shift in you, to the extent that they cannot not be affected by that.
I look, and it's great because I think when people see that I can demonstrate change by committing to a learning, that they can also do the same, and they can
Absolutely.
coach their teams to do the same. So it creates a cascade effect through the organization,
Yep.
which I'm super proud of. And I know you're working with with me and other people in the team to just kind of get some of that learning as well. Yeah, I'm really pleased that it's made such a big difference for people in my team.
Absolutely. I mean, specifically, very quickly, very early on, you shifted from telling, what was important to you, telling issues, to asking questions. I mean, it was remarkable. And it sounds like a very simple shift. And you could say that to people and think, yeah, of course. But it's not a simple shift, not in the way that you've managed that, the way that you've mastered that, I would say.
And it would be very remiss for us to pretend that it just happened without quite a lot of dialogue between us and practice, including what I. So I had to go back to the basics of repracticing clean questions and truly listening. And I remember the conversations that we were having about a year ago around truly listening to people.
Yes.
And the power of that. And I don't always get it right, and I've learned to kind of reflect after meetings and kind of almost critique myself. Was I actually living to the values that I know are the things that I want to bring into meetings? But just asking people questions is such an easy thing to say and such a difficult thing to do in the corporate setting, especially when the legacy organization culture that I inherited was one that information was given up and decisions were sent down. So we did have to go through a period of time where when asking questions, people weren't necessarily prepared for that.
No.
And in big meetings, a question can be seen as a potentially a disguised piece of feedback rather than a true question. And so it's taken us a while to actually kind of get to the point where people can feel that a question is a genuine question. And there's no ulterior motive behind it. And certainly it's made a difference, not just in my team's forums, but when we invite other people in as well. It's starting to feel much, much more collaborative.
That excellence, as I would describe it, because the subtleties that you've described there are so important. People can think, oh yeah, I can ask her, and they'll often think it's an open question, just ask. But it's where it comes from, as you say, that sincerity of truly listening, and it being authentic, the reason why you're asking the question. It's so much wrapped up in it. That it
is,
makes...
and there's another piece in there that's I've just reminded myself of, which is there were questions that we asked sometimes, and I asked, that were rooted in maybe questioning, was the information that was being presented correct?
Yes.
And what we decided as a team was that anybody coming in, we weren't going to second guess that the numbers, the information that was being presented needed critiquing on the spot in terms of its validity, and that we would ask questions about, so how do you see this, and what would you recommend? And if there were some gaps in the data, or maybe something was slightly off, actually that was far less important. And I think that was something that we're still working on, but it really moved us forward in terms of the discussion. So instead of looking at a slide, as many people do in a corporate setting with lots of numbers on it, instead of looking at it and saying, well, is that number correct? I would have thought it would have been a little bit higher, a little bit lower. We're asking different questions, and it's getting a much different buy-in from the folks that are working around us.
Well, you're operating at a different level. You're operating at the level of the structure of how things are happening between you and in the organization, not just the content. Of course, the content's important, but change comes from another level. And that's an illustration of, let's explore how we do this, rather than perhaps put people off from sharing things by pointing holes in what they're presenting.
Absolutely. I think it signals that you're not just talking about empowering the team, you're actually doing it and you're living
Yes.
it. And the piece that takes a little while, but is now very evident in my organization, is that people come into a room with a very different sense of ownership of the things that they're presenting. And then when they go away, you know that ownership is indelible. You're not having to chase up on it. I can't remember the last time that in one of the leadership or senior forums that I engage with, that we've discussed, made a decision on a path forward, and then I've actually had to follow up to check that that's happening. We just know it is now. And we know that the teams will then come back if there's a challenge and they need some help to get something back on track. And that's kind of like a wow moment in terms of how corporations really get efficiency working for them. When you've got
Absolutely. And there's another example recently that and it's up to you whether you expand on this one or not, but when you recognize that you hadn't at first really understood some of what was behind something that somebody said to you, that you'd taken it at a face value. And then having discovered that, the way that you've acted to learn about how to do that, and then subsequently in another situation where you were talking about the flight, for example, how you used what you learned. And I was so flexible in the way that and I don't know whether you want to fill in the details of any of that, because I'm talking in abstract terms at the moment, because obviously what you tell me is confidential.
Well, the interesting thing is that I go through life just looking for learning opportunities for anybody. It's this wonderful piece of what can I see a piece of excellence in somebody, and if so, seek to try and understand it so that I can learn from it, model it, as you might say, in the future. And I've had some great conversations that I guess in times gone by, they might have just been small talk on a plane, but I will ask more questions now and listen more intently to the reasoning to unpack and understand it. So, yeah, I spend a lot of time in aeroplanes, going around, and I've learned some amazing things. Interestingly, I've learned as much about human interactions by talking to the crews that are operating the aeroplanes and having good conversations with them, as I have talking to very senior people who in organizations who might occupy the seat next to me in an aircraft.
Yes.
And that's a very disarming way as well. And when I take that back into the business, and I do try and practice this, when I go to a manufacturing site, the best piece of insight I might get from meeting the hundreds of people on that site that I go to, it could be from the maintenance engineer or the person that's running what would seem at face value to be a fairly lowly role in the whole organization, and there's a piece of honesty in that, which is fantastic.
And learning comes from the most unexpected places.
It does. And the other piece that you alluded to, I'm not always as perceptive to the choice of words that people use when they communicate with me sometimes. And some of our conversations recently have been about trying to use that information to better understand where they're coming from, maybe, and respond to what might be motivating them rather than just the facts on the page. I think that the lovely thing now is I feel confident enough to then approach that situation, and clarify things in a way that maybe I would have felt like I was quite clunky in doing it.
Well, I got the sense that it was more than you just listening to words, that you were sensing and noticing, people's behavior, their nonverbal behavior, for example, to go beyond the words of what they were telling you, to sense their state. So it's like putting yourself in their shoes to really, get a sense of what was happening for them and then act on that.
Yes. Yeah. Realizing that people have got many, many different levels and they're communicating in many, many different ways, spending the time to truly absorb as much of that insight as I can get so that I can engage with them in a way that's going to make the biggest difference for them.
And that was the other thing that impressed me, is the decision that you made in that situation, where you recognize that you could, for example, reassure somebody, but it wasn't going to be the sort of words that would make a difference. And you told a story to distract them. And I thought,
Yes.
wow, that's flexibility.
It's very, I mean, that particular example, and for those kind of listening today, I'll set it out. I was taking a flight in the United States, and I was with colleagues on the flight, and the flight was incredibly bad because we had very, very strong winds. Um, I would probably say it's the worst flight I've ever been on. Um, and one of my colleagues clearly wasn't in a position to be able to kind of manage it, was having a very tough time. As you say, I kind of was thinking about, okay, what role can I play here to help a fellow human being, my colleague, be calmer. And yeah, you're right, I chose to tell some stories just to kind of buy her into something different and completely take her mind off of it.
Yes.
So my storytelling was a very kind of powerful tool in that moment to help somebody de-stress and depressurize and try and relax as best as they could.
I think what was very special was that you had that awareness and you thought about the choice that you had. It wasn't just a say anything, that you thought, my sense of the way you describe it, you thought very carefully about what would work, having put yourself in their shoes. I mean, these are just such sophisticated skills. It could seem like chance to somebody, that's sitting alongside you, but they're not. It's a real, there's a lot going on to be able to choose to do that. You've got sensitivity, flexibility, we talk about these things in what I teach, but this is how to live them.
I couldn't agree more. And I think even a few years ago, I would have chosen to take an engineer's approach to providing evidence as to why somebody needed to be concerned. So isn't it interesting that one can kind of like continue to enhance skills around this kind of space and clearly do it in a way that that makes a difference for somebody else?
Absolutely. And that you never know where they're going to come into force, so to speak. Like, plan, for this to happen on an aircraft. It's just that, hey, here's a situation.
Exactly.
Lent itself to that.
Exactly.
Wow. So the other, just moving a tangent slightly, to Ghost, your dog.
Oh, yes.
So we haven't said in this, I'll say it in an introduction, I'll put it in the write-up about this, but you're working in a company that deals with animal health products. And most people have pets, I believe, in your organization.
They do, yes. Yeah, the vast majority of people.
And you have days when people bring their pets into the office.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I just think it's amazing, because you could have, this investment in animal health, but again, not be living it. But you're so dedicated to animals.
It's a very genuine kind of like culture matchup, isn't it? I think if it's almost like if we weren't doing it, then what else could you believe about the organisation that we're there? And I think having walked the corridors of quite a lot of corporate organisations, working for them and working with them, I think there is a true difference between those that have amazing presentations about what the culture is versus companies that actually have a culture that just exists in the people that are there. And this is one of those lovely kind of evidence points where you can say, oh yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
But you would remember from 2009, I brought my Labrador with me, so my connection with animals has been strong for many years. But
Yes.
it's a lovely thing to see people bringing an extra member of their family into the office on a regular basis.
You ever get dog fights?
Just like people, we get dogs that get along, and we get dogs that really would prefer not to be in the same space as each other.
Oh, wonderful. I won't ask if they correlate to their owners or not. Like read the environment.
Exactly, but I've been very fortunate now. Now Ghost, who's a puppy, he's just turned 6 months old, so he's coming into the office with me a few days a week. So that's a really nice experience. One of the pieces that I've noticed, and I did it with Moss, my Labrador, previously, is when people are having a tough time and a tough day and they're trying to work through some stuff, animals seem to have an amazing way of just helping people relax and be in the room. And so when people come into my office and they say hi, and then the next thing that they'll do is they'll go and say hello to Ghost and stroke him for a bit. The person that's then sat down next to me having a conversation is just a very different person than
Yes.
it's lovely to see.
It's amazing. I mean, that's been a discovery rather than an intention?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think I kind of discovered this by accident, taking my dog in with me many years
Yeah.
ago. I worked in a very different organization, and there was almost a queue at the door on the days when I came, so that they could, not to see me, but to come in and pet the dog, because there's some connection and
Yes.
some feedback that they enjoy from that. It's wonderful.
Well, I remember when you brought Moss to the program all those years ago, and I
Yeah,
think you said you'd keep him outside at first, but eventually either he found a way in or you found a way to bring him in, and he was sitting with you and was extraordinarily well behaved. Is that a reflection of you?
what a good question. I think there's many people that would say I'm not well behaved, but he most certainly was very well behaved,
He
and
was.
so is Ghost. It's an interesting thing that I've always wanted my dogs to be well behaved and well trained, because they can just experience more of life and they can go with you to so many other places. So it becomes a very fulfilling kind of thing, rather than having to worry, where's my dog gone and what are they going to do next? So it's more motivation from that side of things. But I've been very blessed, and Moss was with me for 16 years,
Yes.
which is a wonderful gift. And I know he touched the lives of lots and lots of people.
Yes, but how lovely that you think, that he can experience more by being well behaved. I mean, just the way you put that is so altruistic, for him. And there's just and there's lots of other areas I want to explore, but you're going to be presenting at the alumni this year. And this is the reason why I just think you've got such key messages that people can learn from, and your example. I was intrigued in our last conversation about your commitment to your physical health, your
Mm-hmm.
physical well-being. And you said you discovered this kind of void in your awareness about that, and you're addressing that.
Yes. You're never too young to learn. There's is where this comes from, and it it's amazing, given how much I've enjoyed kind of sport exercise for many years. In the last year, my eyes have been opened up thinking about the science behind what I'm eating, and how I'm consuming food and energy and protein, and it's been a game changer for me. Honestly, it really has. Um, and I'm living that on a regular basis now. It's making a huge difference to my kind of overall health and
Yes.
well-being. But I'm amazed that there continues to be so much out there that I don't understand, and so grateful that there are people that are out there that are willing to share it and help train and educate. So there's part of me in that circle of life, me sharing to other people and them sharing back with me.
Absolutely.
I love learning. It's something that really kind of inspires me, and I tend to kind of go from subject to subject to subject. I mean, you can see all the books behind me here, right? I soak this stuff up, and at the moment, I'm really enjoying learning a lot about nutrition, which is something I can pass on to my son and other people.
Well, one of the presuppositions, one of the beliefs in NLP, mind and body are one. And it's one of those things that people can read and think, yeah, maybe, but this is an example that it's one. And you're investing and learning about all aspects of self. As you realize there's a gap, you learn about it. And coming from that place of just wanting to learn.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I'm finding that I've become a lot more understanding now about when I am in a good state versus not in such a good state, and being able to define now whether that's because maybe there's a physical aspect of it, that I've been traveling a lot and not sleeping or not had good diet or good exercise, or whether there's an element around particular stresses at work or in family life. And actually understanding what's at the root cause of it, one, helps me to come to terms with it, personally quite quickly, and say, that's interesting. And then the second part is I'm able to then progress on to actually be able to try and fix it and kind of get beyond it much quicker, because I can diagnose where it's come from.
So maybe one last question for now. The picture behind you that you've got on your shelf, so you just referred to the books.
Yeah.
The picture.
Yes, it's lovely, isn't it? This one
Yes.
is a painting from the centre of Dublin. I from an artist that was displaying his work on the railings around one of the parks in the centre of Dublin when we were walking around one day, and I really like the colour, the kind of like the energy that comes from the picture. What I really loved was the fact that we got to meet the artist, and the artist told us about the painting, and so it's more than just a two-dimensional thing for me. It now has the connection from the guy who painted it, who spent time with us and told us about what he was trying to get from the painting, and so there's more to it than just that. But it makes me smile. It's got a lovely blue sky, which, in fairness, might be some artistic license, given that it's a picture in the middle of Dublin. But I love all the people energy in it and the nice vibrant colours. It's a great addition.
In a way that sort of takes us full circle in this conversation, in the sense that you were talking about clean questions, and they're very much about getting below the surface. And here you are, it's like, the way you do something is the way you do everything. And you got below the surface in terms of this painting. It's not just a picture that you like, that you know the artist. You got below the surface. And that just permeates everything that you do.
I believe it does, and I believe it makes a huge difference to how we go around being in the world and the difference we make with other people.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to bring this to a pause here, Nick. It's just been a treasure talking to you. It always is. But just to bring a lot of the things we've been discussing over time as well together is delightful. And we can describe your role in the company in a write-up around this, and it's a very significant role that you're in, with great responsibility. And to listen to this very personal way that you live the values, and that you are learning in such a way that's moving that whole organization forward, and especially the teams close to you, is just what I would wish people to be doing in the world at large.
It's very kind.
I really thank you for this time and for that discussion, which was a jewel.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the help you continue to give me as well, Sue, on this journey. It's a privilege and one that I'm enjoying very much as well.
Thank you, Nick. I'll pause if necessary.
Okay.
We're just adding this bit on because our conversation's continued. I suspect there may be jewels in this.
Well, okay, don't set me up for failure. But there was, I was on a flight coming from the States across to Ireland a couple of months ago, and the weather was terrible, and so the inbound flight was late arriving, and they had to check it over for snow and ice on the wings, and the captain came into the waiting area to talk. And normally it's the person on the desk that's kind of checking all the tickets going through, who makes a very straightforward statement about the flight is delayed. But the captain chose to come off and just give people the extra information. Said, so look, we got to do it. We're doing a walk around. It's important that we get this right, so please bear with us. And I thought, wow, that's amazing, because there's you get connection, and the person that's in charge of the plane is taking care of everybody. And then what was amazing was he didn't just stop there. When we got onto the plane, he then came out of his cabin and took the microphone again to explain to everybody that they had checked the wings and everything was okay. And this was the process that we were now going to go on to go through de-icing before we take off. And there were lots of planes. And then the best part of this, he said, as everybody was in the technical aspects of this, he said, and if you're on this side of the plane, you'll be able to look out and see just the amazing scale of everything going on at the airport as they do all of this fantastic stuff. There's lots of, and it just completely took everybody out of the moment to the, I wonder if I'll be able to see lots of flashing lights out through the window and people spraying stuff. And you could feel the tension and everybody's shoulders just kind of like ease and go, we're okay. This is not something I need to concern myself with. So those are some of the things that I really kind of listen to and probably digest in a very different way these days.
And have, undoubtedly. You the expression I say very often, if you spot it, you've got it.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that story to close with. It's just delightful.
You're welcome. You're more than welcome. Keep coming back to these kind of little kind of stories.
Yes.
Probably the most indelible moment that I've ever seen somebody come in and connect was when my wife was giving birth to our son, and we'd been in because the labour was induced, and we'd been there for many hours, and we'd got into the delivery room, and I was trying my hardest to kind of calm my wife and make sure that everything was as good as possible. And the midwife came into the room, walked up to the bed with a particular smile, but of complete and utter confidence on her face, put a hand on my wife's arm and said, it's going to be okay. And within 5 seconds of interaction, all the stress on my wife's face just went. And my goodness, there's some magic in that. Yes. I sat on the opposite side of the bed, just simply amazed that somebody had that capacity, and they must do it on a regular basis with many people, but to be able to just share that confidence and that you can rest assured that I've got you, everything's going to be okay, was an amazing thing to behold. It really was.
And what you say, she's communicating, it's not just the words, she's communicating the confidence that she has inside.
Everything about her. and so very different than you might see doctors or consultants come in with intellectual presence in the room.
Yes.
She came into the room completely in control of herself, everything around her, and then shared that with my wife that was about to give birth. And my
Yeah.
wife just completely gave over to it and just went, "Okay, that's
Yes.
that's all okay then." What a magic capability that person had.
Absolutely. That's also a wonderful note on which to pause. I just can't resist keeping on recording these.